Coté, there's something we say often on this show, and I don't want to say it anymore. I want a paradigm shift here. Okay. And that is, we say over and over again that I'm new to tech. And at this point, I've been in tech for 5 years, which I think is kind of a long time. Mm-hmm. I've seen Kubernetes come into existence and proliferate everywhere. Sure. And now I'm seeing this AI paradigm shift. I've seen some stuff. So I think when we want to talk about how I'm less experienced than you, then what we need to start saying is that you're old to tech.
I think that's good. I like it. Since I'm old, that's, in fact, my mother is here for the summer. She comes for the summer every year. Uh-huh. And there's, as it is when, there's many funny phrases that the family has. And one that she recognizes is she'll often start with things, well, I'm old. And this is like her reasoning for anything. Yeah. So maybe I can just pick that up from her. I can start saying, well, Whitney, I'm old.
Drop the to tech part.
Yeah, just that's right.
We're about the same age, so I'd prefer not that.
Okay. I need to add the to tech. Yes. Okay. That's good.
But so one of the trends you've seen happen since you're old to tech is you've seen this idea of developer advocacy come into fashion and maybe out of fashion, debatable. What was it? What did you think when you first heard the idea of developer advocacy?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think when I first heard it, it was called evangelism. And it was in the late 90s when I was in high school and, doing HTML pages on AS400s. Yeah, because you had Guy Kawasaki, who wrote all these books about evangelism, the Apple evangelist, and he worked somewhere else, I think. Anyways, and then Microsoft, once I started paying attention, since I'm old to tech, in the late 90s, they were, I think they called them evangelists, but they were renowned for their, what we would call devrel or community management or whatever, evangelism back then. And they were, and eventually, was this before it was called devrel? Well, I think I became aware of it when devrel started being more of a term, kind of, with the rise of open source that seems to have sort of taken over from this previous era. But I'll have to go look it up. But there was somewhere in all the Microsoft cases in the 90s, there was actually this phenomenal set of emails and a document that was released that was like their evangelism, Black Ops book, which is fascinating to read through. Anyways, the guy who wrote it went off to make his own instruments in Australia or something, if I remember. It's an interesting story there. But so that's kind of so there was that trend there. And then I was a Java developer. So there was a lot of Java, devrel, evangelism stuff for a long time. And then, around the early 2000s, that's when open source stuff took off. And that I don't know, that seems to have been a whole phase of devrel stuff. And I guess it still is. And then you had SaaS places. You have kind of the DevOps, DevRel, SaaS era situation where where I always, working at companies that always sold a bunch of on-premises software, I always thought it was not cheating, but I was envious. Just you could just hand out a little code and someone could use your shit without having to get a team of 5 people in for 3 months to install something. Kind of a bummer. And I what's after that? I don't know. I mean, I guess to your point, or not to your point, as you were saying, as far as if I was arranging a book of the history of devrel, you can't document everything. I think the next chapter would be Kubernetes and just kind of figuring that out. And at the moment, I mean, I was actually thinking, what with the guests we have, I was wondering, obviously there is devrel, but to skip ahead a little bit, maybe we'll discuss this, is I don't know if OpenAI does devrel, and yet there they are, right? It's sort of there's, I don't know, it's not so much that things are different or changed, it's that there's this new way of doing tech, and I don't know what devrel is for it. It's very vague. Was that the question?
My question was, what were your first impressions? Like when you first heard of such a thing, which you didn't answer in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. I think my first impressions, this goes back to last episode where we were talking about communication stuff, is I think I was like, that seems great. I want to go to conferences for free. So like, I think I was attracted to all that kind of stuff.
You were like, yes, I want to be one. So you weren't really thinking about should it exist. You're like, if someone's paying somebody to do that, I want to be the one they're paying.
Yeah. Because of course it exists. You gotta do all the stuff that it is, right? You can't just have like, you can't just have you can't just have a billboard on the 101 that's like, have you tried Yahoo? Like, you gotta do other work.
Of course it exists. You gotta do all the stuff that it is. You heard it here first.
That's right. That's why I'm really good at a keyboard.
So our guest today, Mary. Hello, Mary. You've written a book about the business value of developer relations. So
hello.
You might. Yes. Hello. Will you introduce yourself, please, and comment on Coté's monologue?
Happy to. My name is Mary Thengvall. I've been doing community stuff and developer relations and all of the things that touch on those various topics basically my whole career without completely knowing it. These days, I'm at a company called Camunda, and we do process orchestration and automation, basically help you run all of the processes that you need to keep your business up and running in the back end. And I led the DevRel team there for 5 years, and these days am a program manager focusing on more of our strategic initiatives. But I've done a lot with DevRel. I've written a lot about DevRel over the years, kind of stumbled through a lot of it, as many of us did early on, and figured out what worked and what didn't, and learned from each other. But yeah, I think, Coté, most of your summary is spot on, right? That like it's been around for a long time, and especially if we consider, in my opinion, developer relations is community management for a technical audience. And community management has been around forever, right? Like people build communities, they create communities. And so this idea of we're now creating a community around people who use our product is not necessarily that revolutionary of an idea, but how it can really drive your business forward, set your business apart, make a huge difference in your success in the tech industry, I think is where people really started to pay attention to it. But I did like your point about, OpenAI. Do they even have a DevRel team? Like, do you need a DevRel team if something is that popular? So excited to chat more about that.
Before we get into that juicy stuff, you said you've felt your way through it and you've seen what works and what doesn't work. I'd love to hear what doesn't work. Tell me a disaster story.
So a lot of the, hey, all I do is travel and go to conferences side of things, right? That was so popular late 2000s, early 2010s kind of era, just isn't sustainable. There were a lot of companies that just went, cool, we're just going to throw a lot of money at sponsoring conferences and making sure that our name is out there in all of these places, which works to a certain extent. But turns out you actually need to bring relevant information back to your colleagues from those conferences. And part of the reason it didn't work was because some people didn't do that. And part of the reason it didn't work is because the external assumption of what people did and how they did their job as a developer advocate, developer evangelist was simply traveling a lot and partying all the time. And so that perception, I think, helped create this wrong impression of, well, we don't actually know what you do, but you party a lot. So are you actually really essential to what we're doing at this company?
Or what I would see in the field sometimes, or maybe even often, was that the presentations themselves by those career travelers were very soft, or not incredibly related, or they didn't lend a lot of like technical credibility to the company that was sponsoring that particular speaker.
Right. And the unfortunate thing about that is that it caused kind of this overall perception from conference organizers that most developer relations professionals give sales pitches, which is not necessarily true. But it gave this impression of, well, we might as well be inviting, pre-sales engineering or the consulting team or things like that, where, look, your point in being up here is to sell your product, when in reality, some of the best talks I've ever attended have been from dev advocates who, mention their company in the context of, hey, I work here and we have a booth if you're interested in knowing more about our specific product. But also, I'm talking about all of these other things today and these bigger concepts and these more important things that you're likely more interested in hearing about. And it might relate vaguely back to what their company does, right? Someone could go talk at a conference about the importance of process orchestration, and they might happen to work at Camunda, but it's not a sales pitch about our product. It's the concept of, no, you need to understand why this is important to keeping your business running smoothly. And that's a very different talk than, let me show you our product. Let me talk you through, how this works.
In my very reasonable amount of tech experience, what I've seen is a divide in company organization between like, okay, here's our product-led growth type people, like here's our customer educators, and then developer advocates are specifically community focused. So they, like you said, they might mention the product in passing as part of a more open source or popular solution or technology they're talking about, but they're not focused on trying to sell anything at all. In fact, they're directly told not to, because that messes up credibility.
Right. And I think the successful DevRel teams, that's absolutely the case. And I think a lot of times it really depends on what the internal support that those teams have looks like. Because I've also run into some teams who, hey, we have a booth that we're sponsoring at this conference. And at the end of the conference, that poor team is running around to every other sponsor in the building because they have to get X number of leads scanned by the end of the conference. And that's their success metric for the entire conference. And you go, okay, well, yeah, I mean, if you have to hit X number of people scanned, regardless of the quality of those scans, yes, absolutely scan my badge, but you need to understand I'm going to unsubscribe with the first email that I get from your company. So sorry.
So you just said the thing everyone talks about in DevRel, which is success metrics. I don't think there's consensus around what success looks like in developer relations.
I don't think there ever has been. And I think part of that is, in my opinion, it really depends on the goals of your company and the stage of your company. Because at the end of the day, DevRel is really, we tend to be a service organization internally. So, hey, we're in a place where the product is super early. We need technical content out there explaining how to use the product. Great, DevRel can fit that role. Or, hey, we're starting to get some good traction in a few specific audiences. Do you know of any developer-facing conferences that might be good for us to go generate some additional interest at? Sure, no problem. Hey, we're receiving a lot of feedback, and that feedback isn't, we're not understanding it, and the product management team doesn't have the time to sort through it. Can you get a little more clarity around this feedback? Sure, no problem, right? Like it can wind up being a department that really takes on the needs of the company and winds up just being kind of a yes team to, hi, what do we need? What can we do? How can we help? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But then when, hey, we need more awareness and more engagement. Can you go to this conference? Those metrics go back to the demand generation team. Or, hey, we need some solid documentation, that goes back to the engineering team or the product management team with the feedback and everything else. And so it can be difficult to define what metrics are specific to developer relations and developer relations only.
Yeah.
And find our space in there.
It sounds like from what you're saying, the role of a developer advocate or developer relations professional could be many things. It could be documentation. It could be blog writing. It could be speaking at a conference. It could be making videos. So part of not being able to have a unified success metric is just not having a unified idea of what that job even is, what that
100%. 100%. And that applies to community management as well. I was just speaking with someone the other day who's looking for a what they call a developer community manager, which could mean everything from, hi, can you stand up a forum for us and make sure people have a good experience, to you're going to be engaging with these developers on the forums and answering their questions. And those are two very different skill sets, right? Are you responsible for setting up the program, or are you responsible for being the front person in that program and engaging with those people? And so it really, anytime anyone's looking for a job, it's okay, go look at the job descriptions and make sure you fully understand what's actually involved in this based on the requirements, the responsibilities. And people, I sent that developer community manager job to a developer advocate friend of mine because I went, look, the job title isn't what you've done in the past, but you are absolutely a community-minded developer advocate and fully qualified for this job. I think it might actually be a good fit for you, right? So I think there's a lot of that confusion that comes from, well, what's the actual standardized understanding of what this job entails? And there isn't one.
Well, so along those lines, like how would you reverse interview a company to determine you didn't want to take that job? Like, I think I'm thinking, I think both Whitney and I have talked to at least one person I would have in mind. And I think I was kind of like, that they don't need a DevRel person.
Sure.
But what are the signs, but both what are the negatives and the positives? And just to I was thinking of that because a lot of what you were going over and what people talk about with doing DevRel right, seems like there's a lot of structure to the company. Like people aren't just doing stuff by the seat of their pants and doing whatever it takes. That seems like a terrible situation for a DevRel person to be in.
100%. And there's so many companies out there right now. And I mean, this is the same circumstances we were in 10 years ago as well, where they go, we're looking for a founding DevRel professional. And it's like, well, do you want me to found the team? Do you want me to do the work? Do you want me to do everything? Oh, you want me to create the programs and run the programs and create the content and create the documentation and get the feedback and go speak at conferences? I don't physically have enough time in the week to do half of those things, right? Yeah. So one of the things that I start with is just why? Why are you wanting this professional? Why, in my case, in interviews in the past, why are you wanting to create this team? And if the company doesn't have a clear idea around these are the goals that we have, even if they don't have the metrics defined, but in general, here's the gap we need to fill, the problem we're looking to solve, the goals that you have in general for the team or the expectations that you have for the team, that can tell you a lot. Because I've literally had friends who have interviewed and asked that question, and the company comes back and goes, well, because that's what we're supposed to do. It's like, wait, what do you mean that's what you're supposed to do? Like, well, we don't have a DevRel team and we're a tech company. It's like, oh, okay. Well, what do you think a DevRel team does? Well, I mean, that's why we're hiring somebody to tell us that. It's like, oh, okay. All right. Well, let's start with some education. And this is a very different interview now. So yeah, I start with why. Why are you wanting a DevRel team? Why this role in particular? Why these tasks in particular? Why these responsibilities? And that tells you a lot about who is currently doing the work, how things are currently organized, if they're fully starting from scratch. And then the second question, if they are fully starting from scratch, is how much leeway do I have to do what I think we need to do? Because if we're starting from scratch and you're pulling me in as a professional and a knowledgeable person in this space, but I don't have the ability to actually make the decisions that I need to make and make the changes throughout the company that I need to make, I'm set up for failure. It's not a healthy environment for me to enter.
You wrote your book, The Business Value of Developer Relations, like 7 years ago now, in 2018.
Yeah, 2018. Yep.
What's changed since then?
So it's funny because the way that I wrote it was very specifically like, let's not mention specific tools. Let's not mention, this is the one thing that every company has to do. It was a lot more, here's the questions to ask. Here's the things you need to understand. And a lot of that, from what I've heard from other people, and when I've gone back and looked up things again from it, it's the same principles are still there, which I'm actually really proud of. Like, it still sells really well. I'm working on finishing an audiobook that'll hopefully finally be out by the end of this year. Because I've had
an
audiobook version of it.
Oh, of that book. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yes.
Cool.
And so as I've reviewed things, like, of course, the interviews that I've done and the places that people work are different, but the principles themselves are largely still there. And it's been interesting to me to kind of see how people are handling devrel these days, and the types of activities that exist still versus the principles and things that we've talked about from the beginning. And a lot of them are still very applicable and still very meaningful to building a strong community of users of your product.
That's cool. So I'm a technical advocate at Datadog. And one thing Datadog does differently that I think is great, maybe it's not that different, but in my, pretty awesome tech experience, it is. And that is, part of my role as an advocate is to enable engineers to help tell their stories. And I think it's really valuable as part of the role. Have you seen that elsewhere? What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's been a couple companies that I've been with where we've set up essentially an internal speakers bureau of, okay, you want to become a better speaker. You want to give presentations that are well received. You want to write better abstracts. And I think anytime that we can do that, it's a more meaningful, and I'm being very careful about how I'm saying this to not offend people. It's a more meaningful conference talk when you're speaking at a hyper technical conference, because it's the engineers who are building the products who are speaking.
Yeah.
Like, that's not to diminish the knowledge of the advocates or other people who might be speaking, but you want to listen to the people who have your same job, right? Who have your same experience. And so anytime you can empower engineers to get out there and speak for themselves, I think that's fantastic. And it tends to work really, really well.
Well, so do you think, do you think I don't even know what to call it, the changed nature of Twitter has had like a effect on things? And I ask that because I talk with a lot of people in the DevRel space, and they're like, yes. they're basically like, there used to be this one place that you could do all the stuff, but I don't know, like how's that panned out since, because I think that's in 2018 it was still fine, right? Like it
absolutely was. Yeah. I think it's done a couple things. I think on a personal level, for a lot of us, it's split or just completely disintegrated the community of people we used to engage with, right? Like, that was my technical friend group. That was, people you'd meet up with at conferences and go, oh my gosh, I followed you on Twitter for 8 years. This is fantastic. We finally get to meet, right? Like, it was an easy way to reach a decently sized audience and get feedback, get opinions, share concepts. And it was just such a great way to really engage with everybody. There's other platforms that have obviously stepped up since then, but I haven't been able to find a single platform that has the same group of people or the same level of engagement. So I think that's definitely changed. One of the things that's fascinating to me is LinkedIn seems to be taking the place of that to a certain extent these days, less so on the, personal updates side, but hey, I'm looking for feedback on this question. Hey, I have a random thought about my career or my role, and I'd love to get other people's feedback on it. Here's the content that I wrote recently. All of those types of things, I'm seeing that pop up on LinkedIn. And that's been an interesting adjustment for me, because LinkedIn previously for me was solely, am I changing jobs? Great, go update it. But it was not a place that I spent time other than that. And so I've had to be very intentional about, oh yeah, there's interesting stuff on LinkedIn. Let me go look and see what's going on and what's happening there. But I definitely think that's changed the level of casual conversations about tech and about what's happening and sharing feedback and things like that.
So developer advocacy and maybe LinkedIn too, there's so much to do with content creation. I think like what that type of content is can vary, but I think it's pretty universal that content creation is a part of developer advocacy. And now we have Gen AI in the mix. So everyone can create content, or someone whose job it is can create 10 times the content.
Sure.
How has AI changed the field?
I think, like most things, there are pros and cons. There are some ways when it's incredibly helpful, and other ways where I go, oh yeah, that's not going to work in any way whatsoever. And 90% of the content that you're spitting out is incorrect. Okay, let's start from scratch. But I've known a lot of people who have struggled over the years with that blank page syndrome of where do I start? How do I even get going? And sometimes it would take, hey, a 30-minute conversation with someone brainstorming about the topic. Sometimes it would take just free form brain dump of information. And these days they can go, okay, look, here's, the 5 or 6 bullet points of things that I want to make sure that I touch on. Can you give me a quick draft of a blog post? And even if they need to go edit that heavily afterward and fact check everything and all of that, it at least gives them a place to get started.
Yeah.
And so that's where I've seen it being used really well. Is either, creating a first draft of a blog post, taking a blog post and feeding it back into AI and saying, look, I want to do a video version of this. What are the top bullet points that I should really focus on? Kind of give me a script for that video, if you will. And so really streamlining some of I have to sit down and think this through in a heavy way. And if I've got 20 minutes between meetings, I'm going to barely get started on this, maybe get into the beginning of a flow state, and then have to switch to something else.
Yeah.
So it's that idea of being able to just move more quickly, I think, has made a big difference.
Do you think that content that's getting created then is being read in a first person way or consumed in a first person way? Or how much of it is just feeding ChatGPT to answer so ChatGPT can better answer questions?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. That's a good question. I think there's probably some of it that's definitely read by individuals. But I think there's probably a good amount of it that is used then in source material for questions that are being asked.
I always think of the meme that's like someone's telling ChatGPT, like, take this sentence and make it into an email. And then you show the person
Sure.
receiving the email, like, take this email, put it back into a sentence.
Right.
And I think about that with content creation. Like, oh, I have this kernel of an idea, help me shape it into something. And then on the other end, on the consuming end, take this article and summarize it for me.
Yes. Yes.
I was thinking in reading through your book, a metric nowadays, in addition to the ones you have, could be like you show up in LLM output. That, like,
Sure.
you've driven enough, like, whatever it is, that now the answers show up there, your thing. I mean, which is always, that's a nice thing for whether you're in influencer, thought leadership, marketing, or devrel stuff. It's nice to have come up with the phrase that you're associated with.
Is this the new version of a Wikipedia page was created about me?
Probably, yeah.
I show up in the LLM.
or to your point earlier about, like, the devrel person trying to represent for the commercial interests of their company, not themselves,
Right.
but coming up with a concept, and you're the originator of that concept, then having a Wikipedia page made of it. Like,
yes,
I can't. The first one that pops in my head, which doesn't exactly fit here, is like, everyone knows what a Wordly map is, and you put the name right in there, right? And so it's sort of like, you've done it. Right. Like,
right.
You have the name of something. Anyhow, so speaking of tools, what do you think? I mean, I think we can all agree that, like, YouTube is very popular and is a channel to use unless you're in some weird edge case thing. But when you've seen, especially over recent years, where it's done a lot, like, what do you think a devrel person has to do that might feel unnatural if they're going to be in YouTube? Like, what is like a thing? It's not universal, but what are, like, what's, like, the most common thing they have to get over in order for it to work out well for them?
So as a manager, the thing that I've seen the most is people need to get over their perfectionism. Yeah. Because the idea of, oh, I have to do this in one take, it has to be perfect. Or if it's not one take, the edits have to be seamless. Everything has to be spot on, because people have the ability to go back and rewatch it at any time, right?
Yeah.
And a perfect example of this, I had 2 different advocates on my team who were both in the midst of creating videos. One who sent around a draft to the team and was like, look, if you think I need to redo it, I can redo it. But here's what it is for right now. And the only visible issue to me, and it wasn't even an issue, was that, halfway through, they went, oh, by the way, earlier I mentioned such and such, and this is a really good resource about it that I mentioned, or that I wanted to, make a note of. I'll leave it in the show notes. And then kept going. And I was like, this is fine. Like, this is not a problem. This is not an issue. You're going to link it in the caption anyway. Like, we're good. No, don't worry about going back and re-recording this entire thing and spending all that time. Versus someone else on the team who had handwritten, here's my entire script, and then had it, like, on a space on their monitor where they could read it, and it would, like, scroll through as they went, because they just, in their mind, they had to get every single word exactly as it was on the page. And it made it far more
robotic.
Robotic, right? Yeah. Than just casual conversation that you're having with the person on the screen.
So ironically, you're saying the person who did way more work actually had less connection with the audience because they were too perfect.
They were so focused on that perfectionism of, this has to be exactly right. And so I think it's a lesson I've learned over the years, or am still continuing to learn as well. But that idea of, people expect perfectionism because I have to earn that A+ grade. It's like, no, like, it needs to be clear. It needs to be understandable. People need to be engaged enough in the content, whether it's a blog post or a conference talk or a YouTube video, to actually stay interested.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be, gone over with a fine-tooth comb 18 times to make sure that there's absolutely zero ways that it could possibly be better.
Or I've discovered as a content creator just to be like, or whatever and stuff, or like,
as I demonstrated earlier.
Oh, yes, you did. Or to be like, there's some complexity here that I'm glossing over, but this is the main point, and then just moving on as opposed to trying to tweeze, really explain every bit of it.
So maybe there's crossover to just like your non-devrel life. But since you have managed devrel people and et cetera, like I don't know what et cetera was about. I just demonstrated it again. Whitney.
Okay, whatever.
But like when you're like, we could use LinkedIn as a case of this, but when you decide you need to devrel in a medium, how do you figure it out? Like, I mean, we of course you need to ask the why. Like, what do we want to do in there? What do we want to accomplish? Which is part of it, right? But like, so if all of a sudden LinkedIn was all that we had, and you were like, all of the devrel activity has to be in LinkedIn because we can't even go to conferences anymore. For some reason, only LinkedIn exists. Like, so how do you figure out how to use that channel? Like how it works, what to do, et cetera. Like, what's your method for that?
Or whatever.
The stuff. All the stuff.
So the first thing for me is making sure I know what the audience is. Who am I speaking to? Is it the same audience on LinkedIn that it used to be on our blog, than it used to be in the conference that I go to? Probably not. But it might be, right? So do I know who's actually looking at that content? And that could be a matter of just going onto LinkedIn and saying who's posting most often, right? Is it C-suite folks? Is it managers? Is it ICs? Is it consultants or recruiters, or right? Like, who's the audience that's posting a lot? Because chances are that's likely also the audience that's on there a lot reading it. Not necessarily, but there's likely some overlap of who frequents this often, who's interacting with it often. You could also look at who's responding to things that are similar to what you want to be posting and find out, cool, is it senior engineers? Is it junior engineers? Is it college students, right, that are trying to level up their skills? And
that's
then the next
interesting that you say that, because I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like I would start with what outcome do I want? And then I'd figure out how to find the people, as opposed to figure out what people are, who's consuming and then catering to those people.
So I tend to start with the who's my audience, because then, and I guess maybe in this circumstance, since you're saying LinkedIn is the only option, it's not as applicable, but I start with who's my audience because then I want to meet my audience where they are.
Okay.
So if LinkedIn is the only place I can possibly, or that the only place that currently exists that I'm able to post, but LinkedIn is not the audience I want to be reaching, my audience doesn't exist there.
Okay.
Then maybe I go start my own forum. Maybe I go somewhere completely different and say, hey, for anyone who's not on LinkedIn.
My framing was a little extreme,
come find me.
But just sort of like,
but whatever,
pushing into the stuff, the thinking.
Sure.
Yes,
sure. But I think starting with that, who's my audience? Am I going for developers who are going to be using the product, or the team that's going to be deciding whether or not to purchase the product? That's going to change my goal. That's going to change the voice of the content, and it's going to change my call to action at the end.
And then in this case, and to de-extreme it a little bit, I mean, let's just say you found out that you want to do stuff in LinkedIn. You can still go to conferences and do other stuff, which is great. But like, do you have some methodology of like sending out little probes and experiments about what works, or like, are you like, I need to sign up for LinkedIn Premium so I get the big CSV download so I can load it in my analytics? Or like, are you like, I'm going to dedicate 10 hours a week to just reading LinkedIn and writing in my captain's log about what I think about it? And like how do you approach that kind of thing?
So I think that's where I start with what's my goal, right? If it's, hi, I live in marketing and I need to up the number of views that I get, then yes, LinkedIn Premium, absolutely. running small experiments is, in my opinion, always helpful. That could be, hey, Mondays I ask a question. Tuesdays I put out information about the latest piece of content that I wrote. Wednesdays I try to engage with new people that I haven't engaged with before, right? Whatever that might be, because then you can start to see, hey, those questions are doing really, really well. Trying to engage with new people is more difficult and it's going to take more time. But I'm a huge proponent of, for a month, for a quarter, however long it is, run a bunch of experiments. And then at the end of that period of time, go, great. These 5 things worked really well. Let me double down on 4 out of 5 of those. And for the one that worked the best, let's make that our focus for the next quarter. Because
I like
those
that.
experiments tell you a lot.
Yeah, get a science kit out and get some beakers and a Bunsen burner.
And it's not easy. In my experience, it's a good way to get leadership on your side when you go, look, you're asking me to do something new. I don't know what's going to work.
But here I am trying my best. Here's some evidence. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Instead of just feeling around in the dark. That makes a lot of sense. You said something earlier that I want to drill in on, which is you're like, if LinkedIn isn't my people, maybe I go start my whole new platform, which in theory sounds kind of ridiculous, but you've actually done something like that and had success. Have you not?
Are you talking about DevRel Collective?
Yes, I am.
Yes. So when I first got started in community management, developer relations wasn't a term yet. And I have a very distinct memory of the first conference where I ever met somebody who did something similar to me. And it was like immediate friends. Don't leave my side. Can I have your phone number? We need to talk for the rest of our lives. Because it was so rare to find other people who did that exact version of what I was doing. And so there were a handful of us, probably, I don't even know, 2012, 2013, maybe, at a conference one day that there were finally, 6 or 7 of us maybe, who went, okay, we all do the same thing. We see each other at all of these same conferences. At the time, I was doing a lot of work in the DevOps space, which was fairly new at the time. And so, the people I was meeting up with at conferences were working for my competitors a lot of times. But it was this idea of like, oh, I don't care if you work for a competitor. We need to talk. Like, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What's working? What isn't? And we weren't giving away company secrets, but it was just having that camaraderie and understanding of how are you having these conversations internally? How are you helping people understand what it is you're doing? Hey, I tried this new way of explaining something about our product and it worked really well. And it's probably going to work well for other people in the same space. And so there were a few of us who said, look, we need a better way to talk about this and stay in touch when we're not always traveling to conferences. And so we started a group that was originally, back to Coté's original statement, called the Evangelist Collective. And then we went, that's not going to age well. It's not going well.
I'm glad y'all changed that.
This is anymore. And also developer relations is now a term. And so we renamed it to DevRel Collective, and it's continuing to be just a really vibrant community of people who on a daily basis go, help, here's a situation that I'm in the middle of. How do I fix it? What's your experience with this? Am I in a company that this just isn't going to work? Is there a way to make it better? Also sharing wins, right? All of those types of things.
And sharing open CFPs or sharing job postings.
Absolutely.
And it's really a nice place.
Yeah.
What did it feel like for you to make a community that takes on a life of its own? Did it? I could see it feeling, on one hand, wonderful to be like, hey, I made something that matters. But then on the other hand, I could see it like, I could see having opinions about how I think it should go and how I think it should be. I guess the control, losing the control.
I see you.
Yeah.
Yes. It's been fascinating. And as of a couple years ago, I took a little bit more of a step back from being as heavily involved. But it's been fascinating to see, because when we started it, it was very much just, look, whoever wants to join, we'll add you to the group. Like, as long as you know someone in the group, you're in. As long as you're doing something that is related to developer relations vaguely, you're in. And that might be, hey, I'm running a meetup in my city. Well, that's devrel-ish, right? You're creating a community. That's fine. You might be a software engineer or something completely different, but yes, that's fine. And as we started to grow bigger and bigger, we wound up putting an application form in front of it, because we started to find that, suddenly it wasn't just people who were doing the day-to-day work, but the, CMO of their company would join because developer relations reported to them. And then those individuals are going, hang on.
I can't be myself here anymore.
Questions. Yeah. I can't say, here, I'm struggling with this thing at my company. What do I do? Like, none of that conversation can happen in the open, because their boss is now there. So there's a lot of things that we put in place over the years, and that's evolved in and of itself in this extent of, how involved are you in developer relations on a day-to-day basis? Not just, do you have a DevRel team that reports to you, right? So asking a lot more of those types of questions and making sure that people were added as they showed that, they had either had experience in this, or this was a career change that they were very interested in. But nowadays we even have, a private channel for individual contributors and a private channel for managers, so that the ICs can go, my manager did this, and it's not an issue, and get advice about it. And vice versa. Managers can go, this major thing is happening at my company. How do I talk to my team about it? And that major thing could be layoffs. It could be org changes. It could be strategy changes, but just, again, creating those safe places for people to have those conversations openly, and be able to support them in the way that they need that support. But yeah, these days, especially, I think, going from looking back, I knew every single individual who was in there. Like, you didn't have people in there that didn't know each other, to these days. I don't even know.
1,500 people in the workspace.
I think it's bigger than that.
Oh yeah.
Where are we at here? I'm not gonna be able to find it quickly, of course.
That's okay.
It's hard to imagine there would be 1,500 DevRel people in the
3,000.
Oh, there's 3,000.
Not necessarily active, but 3,000 members.
Yeah.
People have signed up before. Yeah.
Absurd to me.
Yeah, that is a lot.
So
very cool. So then you also have a podcast about DevRel. Yes. Is that true?
We do.
I'll say I'm very experienced at tech, but I'm relatively new to podcasting.
Okay. Wait, you've gone from experience to very experienced
in about 30 minutes. An hour.
Or whatever.
I like it. I love the confidence.
But I am new to podcasting. I would love to hear about your podcast in particular, and also maybe some tips.
Sure. So yeah, Jason Hand and I, almost 10 years ago, started the Community Pulse. We are recording our 100th episode tomorrow, which is another one of those things that just feels wild.
Yeah, amazing.
So super excited for that. But again, we started that honestly because we wanted to learn from other people, and wanted an easy way to go, ooh, hang on, I want to pick that person's brain. How do we do that? Let's get them on the podcast and we can ask them all sorts of questions, because then it's official, right? And so it started as this, resource for ourselves that we happened to put out there publicly, and it's done really well. And it hasn't, it's not a top on Apple Podcasts kind of a podcast, but the conversations that we have and the things that we've learned as a result and the discussions we've had over the years, I think have been extremely valuable for me. And I think what we've heard from other people, valuable for them as well. but it's been fun to just, similar to what the two of you do, have conversations about what's going on. What do we think about things? How is this working? What do we want to do differently? Right. And learn from each other as we go, which is great.
I think it's maybe similar to when you're talking about the two different ways people made YouTube videos, and someone does it fast and loose and someone tries to make it perfect. I enjoy the Human Messy podcast where I'm genuine, and it sounds like that's where y'all are at too with your community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We did at one point talk, I'm trying to remember who brought it up. It might've been PJ Haggerty, who's one of our hosts along with Wesley Faulkner. And PJ was like, we should see if we can edit these down to be more, interview driven, like NPR and storytelling and all of this. And I went, great. I mean, you're the one editing our podcast. So if you want to spend the time to do that.
That's right.
And we tried for, I don't know, maybe one episode, and immediately went, oh no, that's way too much work. Never mind.
I think there's two phases of doing a podcast. There's phase one, and then there's I hired an editor, and it's a very different podcast.
100%. I will say, a while back, we hired someone, a contractor part-time, who happens to be a good friend of mine from college, to do the hey, can you find artwork for us? And can you take the blurb that we wrote and finesse it and then put it on the website and then send us a preview of it? And because all of us, we'd record the podcast and have a great time, and then things would just sit there. And then we go, oh wait, hang on. We should actually do something.
You got to tell people it exists.
With that episode that we recorded.
Yeah. That's always a struggle.
Seriously.
I have a theoretical question about Gen AI and community.
Sure.
I wonder how Gen AI is going to affect how people interact with one another. I worry that because you get such a sense you're talking to another human, it makes you feel less lonely, which in a way is good. But also when you type in ChatGPT, they're always telling you how wonderful you are, how great your question is, how smart you are. Do you think we're going to have to just compliment each other nonstop to be able to scratch that same itch?
So it's interesting because I was talking to a friend about this just the other day, where when someone goes to say ChatGPT and goes, I can't believe that so-and-so said this thing, and I, can't get fired. So I need a professional response that stays firm and does this and blah, 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 blah. And ChatGPT comes back with, you're right. That wasn't the right thing for them to say. And you're like, hell yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I mean, all they're doing is agreeing with me.
Yeah.
But the interesting part of it for me, I'm someone who even if we wind up disagreeing at the end of the day or going with a different opinion or a different option or whatever, as long as I feel seen and heard, I'm good. We don't have to do it my way all the time. Just acknowledge what I'm saying. And so I think for me, there's a lot of times when that's all I need. And it's been fascinating to me to see that repeated in things like ChatGPT, where I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's all everybody needs. Yeah.
Right. So I wonder if it's less about we always have to be complimenting each other, and more about, and maybe selfishly, this is what I'm hoping for, is it's teaching us all to see each other and hear each other better and respond to people more openly.
It's teaching us to crave that, but is it teaching us to give it back?
I don't know.
Yeah. But ChatGPT receives criticism graciously. Thank you for telling me that. Literally thanks me for criticizing it.
Yeah.
We should just set up a little session that can teach you how to give that kind of feedback.
Yes.
See if it's good at that. Although, I haven't really thought about this topic until you were talking about it, but that is interesting how the way of talking could leak back into the humans. And it also makes me wonder, is that just because it's trained on American and British English stuff, whereas if we loaded up the Netherlands one, it might not be so nice, and it would just be
be more direct.
We would say it from our American cultural standpoint, but they would say better, right? Like just more direct and more like,
Right.
less, that was, you're right. That was totally inappropriate. Instead it might be something like, well, they might have had a point. Did you do something wrong?
Right. Right.
I actually don't like how it compliments me all the time. It makes me feel suspicious of it. It makes me feel like it's trying to manipulate me.
Have
and
you tried
like a con artist.
to not compliment you?
What's that?
Have you tried to tell it to not compliment you?
I have, not in a while. What I've
curious.
done is I've made a keyboard shortcut. So when I type BC, it expands to be critical. So that way I'm asking it to disagree with me.
I like it.
So I get be critical. Don't blow smoke up my ass.
I'm looking forward to the story one day I hear where you're back channeling with someone during an important meeting and you accidentally typed BC in an instant messaging thing and the whole meeting changed.
Amazing.
Just like an Anchorman moment where the just reads the transcript right off.
Yeah.
I've been dying for permission to tell you what I really think, Whitney.
Well, so like here, the last thing I was interested in, I mean, we'll see if there's something else is, also in your book, back to the devrel stuff, like you mentioned like CRM systems a little bit and like, is there like any good experience using a CRM system for devrel people? Like I've tried over the years in various roles that I've been in and like, I don't think it works. Like, I'm not really sure. Like, I think the CRM is just for maybe the salespeople or the salespeople's boss. Like, I don't know.
So the one positive experience I've had over the years with the CRM for devrel was with Common Room. And these days they are like, they still do the same stuff that we had with all of the integrations from different platforms. But they are more focused on the go-to-market side of things, which is great for them. But it was fantastic because for us, we had our discourse forum, we had a public Slack channel for instance for a while. We had our private Slack for our like champion program and our meetup leaders. We have our, I'm trying to think what else we were pulling from our meetup program. So we pulled in information from that for registrants and attendees. We could combine that with information from Metabase, which is what we use for our product understanding of where people are in the product and what they've used. We could connect it to Salesforce, which is what we use for sales, and see whether or not someone's a customer or a partner or a prospect and all of these things. Right. And having a single profile for everybody was miraculous, it felt like. Because sales would speak up and go, hey, we had a fascinating conversation with such and such an account. And we'd go, oh, well, that's interesting because they've been engaging more in our forum lately as well. And they've been, attending meetups more often in this particular location. Which branch of that organization are you talking to? Maybe there's a connection between those various engineering teams. And it's not just, hey, a light touch from a potential prospect, but they're doing a lot more behind the scenes that you as a sales team aren't aware of because this is your first touch in terms of a sales conversation.
Right.
So like it was helpful from that perspective in being able to connect to the different teams across our company, especially because we had an open source version as well as an enterprise version. And then within the last couple of years, we have a whole new version of the product. And so being able to kind of draw those lines between all of them is huge. But then also reaching out to people for, hey, you might be a good candidate for our champion program was huge because we could pull from all of those different places instead of having to go, hey, this person seems to be, semi-engaged on our forum, but we don't know where else they're engaged.
Yeah,
but semi-engaged in the forum, but highly engaged in these other places. This is great.
Based on what you're saying, in my experience, it seems like, I mean, that experience sounds like what you're supposed to have,
right?
and like, I mean, I guess it's making, I guess this kind of latent theory I have about it is, it takes a lot of effort to have a good overall CRM system, and it's sort of above the effort and that anyone wants to do, that most people want to do. And so therefore you end up with this obligatory thing that like probably just ends up being about like tracking deals, maybe, sort of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so therefore, even though as a DevRel person, the CRM system might be there to be like, I met with this person and log that in, you know, you might as well be, you know, to use the joke word, whatevering into the wind. Like it doesn't really like do anything.
Yeah. And I think especially where the team isn't well established, or the department isn't well established at the company.
Yeah.
They don't have the motivation, frankly, to record all of those things. Because if the sales team isn't actually using that information to further their conversations, or they are using it, but in ways that are really creepy with like, we know that 5 of your developers are on our forum lately. Let's talk. Like, no, please don't. But there's more of a motivation when you know, hey, people are using this content. We can contribute actively to, you know, hey, where should our next 5 Camunda local events be? It's like, well, let's us take a look and see where our community is based. In addition to where our accounts are based, where's that overlap? We can provide that information. And because the other teams started to trust us and started to trust that information and where it was coming from, we were pulled into far more of those conversations. So it's definitely an ideal scenario. But I think it does require a team that's either already really well established, or a company that's willing to put in the effort to establish those relationships, for sure.
Well, this has been a great conversation. That was my bridge. Anyways,
crushed it.
Anyway, it's very, very meta professionalism here in this episode. Well, we mentioned your book several times, and it sounds like there's a one day, based on that it's been 5 years, maybe, or 7 years, maybe just a few more years, right? The audiobook.
An audiobook.
Yeah.
Is this going to be the audiobook where it's like kind of like edition 1.5, where you've gone back and changed some things, and so it's not exactly the book?
To be honest, I didn't change all that much. Like there's a couple little things where it was, you know, I think the only thing that I actually truly changed was there were a couple people that I had interviewed whose pronouns had changed. And so we updated names if appropriate and pronouns. And otherwise, like I have a little snippet at the beginning that basically says, look, companies might be different. The tooling might be different, but the principles are the same. Let's go. I did get asked to do a second edition a year or two ago. And I think I have, while it was a great experience writing a book, I have enough, my partner might say trauma, from writing it as well, that I don't think I'm ready to do a full update like that.
All right. Well, so we got that coming out with some very small updates. I for one hope that you still have a Google Plus reference in it. When I came across that, I was like, this is fantastic. But it was making it even more fantastic. Even at the time, 7 years ago, you were like, this thing is dead. Right.
Right.
It was so like now even more so. Well, and how about other stuff on the you got a homepage on the World Wide Web? Anything like that?
I do, and I've been terrible about updating it lately, but I'm hoping to get back to it. You can get there either marythengvall.com, or if you don't want to have to figure out how to spell my last name, marygrace.community will take you to the same place.
Oh, well, that's quite straightforward. Well, as always, this has been another episode of Software Defined Interviews, which you can find at softwaredefinedinterviews.com. One of the longer domain names you may find yourself typing today, hopefully every day. And this is episode number 107. So if you wanted to see links to that, and probably very little else, because as we're talking about, doing all the post-production for a podcast is kind of a buzzkill. But you could go there and subscribe. You could join the overall Software Defined Talk and Interviews Slack thing that we have, or whatever, at softwaredefinedinterviews.com/107, where there's lots of stuff, etc., and whatever. And with that, we'll see everyone next time, and so forth.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much. Bye.